Hello and welcome to another video on the Life After Brady channel. Inspired by Don Shula's passing today, we're going to take a look by the numbers comparing Don Shula and Bill Belichick, two of the absolute premier coaches in NFL history, arguably two of the top ones, but certainly two of the top five. With that being said, let's take a look at how they compare. The two head coaches started at relatively the same age. Shula was a head coach starting at the age of 33 with the Baltimore Colts in 1963, while Belichick got his start at the age of 39 with the Cleveland Browns in 1991 before being fired in 1995, and then took over for the Patriots at the age of 48 in 2000. Belichick is behind Shula in career wins, with Shula holding the NFL record of 328 wins, while Belichick is at 273 with a slightly higher career win percentage. In terms of playoffs, that's where there is a significant difference, and we'll get into it in a second, but Belichick, obviously, the playoffs have expanded slightly during his time from 5 to 6 teams, for Shula played originally with 2 teams in the playoffs and expanded throughout his career, but 43 career playoff games for Belichick compared to 36 for Shula, but the win percentage is pretty significantly different, 31-12 for Belichick versus 19-17 for Shula, which is exemplified by the Super Bowl appearances and Super Bowl title difference. Belichick, as a head coach, not including his Giant days, has been to 9 Super Bowls, while Shula was only to 6, where he won 3 titles compared to Belichick, who's won 6. And then the big difference, which is, this will be better revisited in around 2030, was their total years as head coach is part of the difference, with Shula starting so much younger. And we'll see how much longer Belichick does go, but Belichick's only been a head coach for 25 years compared to Shula, who was a head coach for 33 years. One note on that is that Shula would have already retired if he was Belichick's age. Shula retired at the age of 65 in 1995, versus Belichick is currently 67 years old, heading into another NFL season. But they did play in different leagues, so let's take a look at the differences that the two experience. Shula, as I said, started in 1963 with the Baltimore Colts. In the first 7 years, there were 16 teams in the league, and then they expanded obviously in 1970 when the AFL and NFL merged, and had between 26 and 28 teams between 1970 and 1994, before they expanded to 30 teams in Shula's final season. Belichick in his Cleveland Brown days played with 28 teams, and then there were 31 teams his first year or two in New England before the Houston Texans joined the league, but has spent predominantly most of his career with 32 teams as we know it. So obviously slightly less diluted for Shula. Obviously, talent's a little bit more spread out for Belichick, which makes it somewhat easier to pounce on some bad teams compared to Shula when he was playing with 16 or 20 teams, but there's obviously been some other differences. A couple of notes: 1967 was the first year of the Super Bowl, and the free agency era to me is the biggest difference. Shula did not have to compete with free agency as it started in 1993, whereas Belichick has coached all but 2 of his years with free agency. And then just some notes in the playoffs. We went by how many teams from each conference made it. Prior to 1970, there was only one. The AFL and the NFL team met in the Super Bowl. In the 1970, they expanded to 4 teams. 1978, they expanded to 5 teams from each conference. And then 1990, they've expanded to 6. So obviously, Belichick's had a higher chance to make the playoffs, and then also you have weaker teams with the 6 teams. The one note with the weaker teams, I'll say though, think of how many times Belichick has been to a wild card game. He obviously has had a bye many times. I don't have the number in here, but it's not like Belichick's a 3 seed beating up on 6 seeds. Primarily, he's getting to that second weekend where he's facing teams. And just the notes there at the bottom of when Belichick and Shula coached. With that said, we'll look at the best stretches of the two coaches, and this is where, to me, you can kind of highlight a couple things. Shula has coached longer. That's why the career wins to me is longer. Now, if Belichick goes and coaches terrible teams for the next 10 years, that'll be different. And then the 3-year peak does go to Shula. The early 70s, obviously that perfect Dolphins team is the main reason for it, but 37-5 in a 3-year stretch, so they went to 2 Super Bowls and had 2 Super Bowl victories. The 71 season, they also made the Super Bowl but did lose it. Compare that to Belichick, who his best stretch is 2015 through 2017, where he only went to 2 Super Bowls and then obviously lost one of them with a slightly lower a significantly lower win percentage with 813 versus 881. But then when you expand it into a larger outside view picture, you'll see that Belichick just has a slight edge to a significant edge. The 5-year peak between 2003 and 2007, Belichick went to 3 Super Bowls, won 2, with an 825 win percentage, obviously capped by that 2007 16-0 season. Surely you just have to expand that early 70s run a little bit more to get to a 57-12 record between 1971 and 1975. And as I said, he went and lost the 1971 Super Bowl. And then to me, the big difference is the 20-year stretch. And I know it's kind of you're picking and choosing, but that's why Belichick's the best. Is he's been able to do it for such a significant longer period of time. About a 70-point win percentage difference in the 20-year stretch, and then just the Super Bowls are significantly different. Shula's only won 2 in his Dolphin time versus Belichick won 6. When you look over it with Belichick, that early run and then the later run. But we'll see where they go from here. As you can see, the early 70s were so important for Shula, and then the later 90s, early 90s were where it dropped off. And you could see the same thing with Belichick. Obviously Tom Brady's gone, Jarrett Stidham in. We'll see who the quarterback is moving forward. But Shula only made the playoffs 4 out of his last 10 years. The Patriots obviously lost in the wild card round last year, so could that be a thing to come? And then in terms of win percentage, the last 8 years, as Belichick has 8 fewer career head coaching years than Shula. Shula in his last 8 years went 73-55 for a .57 win percentage, which is obviously a big difference.